Hello and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always, we have Mick, Devin, and Rainier. And joining us on this episode is Evan. In this week's episode, we're going to be going over a list by Patrick Divers.
Oh, wait, he needs actually a better introduction than that. For those who don't know, Evan is the son of the great Matt Iverson. So if anyone's curious about that. So Matt's here in spirit.
I'm sure they could tell by the beautiful china cabinet in the background.
They just need the dog now.
Yeah.
We just need the dog.
And by Matt's here in spirit, Devin's alluding to Evan killed him to take his place.
Yeah. I did what had to be done.
It's a
I'd like to welcome our new regular, Evan Iverson. But yeah, so we'll be going over a list by Patrick Divers, and then we're going to do the Q&A today. I just want to let everyone know we are available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you're interested in listening to us there. And please let us know in the comment section of any ideas you'd like for future episodes or any lists you may have. And let us know if you like the Q&As, if we should continue to do that as well. But we'll move into the list for this week. So I'll move that over to Devin real quickly.
All right. So this is a 600-point list. Essentially, he's working on a Azog's Hunters Legion Dol Guldur mixed army, and he's been working on this all lockdown. So we're going to start off with the leader, the Lingering Shadow, which is one of the ringwraiths who kind of teleports around 3 inches every priority. And he's leading 3 Gundabad Orcs with shield and spear, 1 Gundabad Orc with shield, spear, and a banner, and 2 Mirkwood Spiders. Then he's got Fimble on Fel Warg, and Fimble is leading 3 Hunter Orcs, 1 Hunter Orc with a 2-handed pick, 1 Hunter Orc with a Warhorn, and 6 Hunter Orcs with a Orc Bows and 1 Fel Warg. Then he's got Yazneg on a Fel Warg with a lance, of course, and 5 Hunter Orcs he's leading, 6 Hunter Orcs with bows, 1 Fel Warg. And he's got 3 Goblin mercenaries led by a mercenary captain. So this is 600 points exactly, and he felt that this would be good for most of the scenarios with a few tricks with the Spiders, Nazgul, and his open-ended changes. So he is looking for competitive feedback from us. I actually like a lot of the ideas here. So just some positives I'll go on for the first part here. 3 mercenaries with a mercenary captain is, I think, always a great option. I'm actually not a fan of filling it out to the max 12. It limits the amount of terrain that you can fit the goblins in and such. And so I think this is perfect. They're clearly an objective play to do something really fast. Maybe the occasional harass siege weapons. Yazneg and Fimble. So trying to remember, Fimble's the one who goes over terrain, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also fight 5. Which is the main thing.
Okay, so fight 5 and he has strike axis, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we got the Lingering Shadow with strike, but to be honest, without the Necromancer in play, realistically, the Lingering Shadow is probably reserving his might to keep himself alive. So maybe 1 heroic strike at best. So realistically, you actually have 6 might on the table, which is actually still solid, because I'm not including a captain because the captain's going to be somewhere else often. So you have like 6 might relatively within your circle of your army, and it's pretty mobile, and 6 might for 600 points is great. Plus you technically do have 4 more. The leader being the Lingering Shadow, I guess, is a non-choice, so you have to have that anyway. I like the Lingering Shadow. So I'm curious on you guys' thoughts. Would any of you have chosen a different Wraith? Because in me personally, I think the Lingering Shadow is my favorite Wraith, and especially for the harassment potential of what he can do in a lot of different situations. But what are you guys thinking there?
No, I like the Lingering Shadow for this list, especially because it just makes him that more better with like Fimble and Yazneg. Because you can pop him out whatever, and he can like do a lot of damage. I like him.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I disagree. Well, though actually, I'd say he's probably the best Wraith to take. Maybe I think if you want to take him as a leader, the Witch King might be a little bit better, just because he has that extra might point, so he's more survivable because he can might up his resurrection rolls. I'm also not sure in this list if you even want a Wraith to be a leader. And that means, obviously, because your Wraith is the only hero of valor, you'd have to remove the Wraiths entirely. So the first thing I look at when looking at how I would want to, I guess, edit this list is swapping the Lingering Shadow out for the Keeper of the Dungeons, and then swapping Yazneg out for Narzug, and then making Narzug your leader. Narzug is the bow guy.
Yeah.
So he would sit at the back of the board, sort of use his might points for maybe heroic moves and stuff like that behind your lines, and try and shoot out heroes' horses, and generally just be a safe leader. And the Keeper of the Dungeons, obviously, he sort of replicates that hard-hitting power with Yazneg.
Does he have strike?
Keeper, yes.
Strike, strength, challenge.
Okay.
Yeah. And hits very hard and is 3 striking might points. So that's my first thought with that, just making a leader that's not going to instantly lose the points for leader wounds, because let's face it, every single game, your Lingering Shadow is going to get wounded. So he's going to get a point for that.
And that is very true. That is something to keep in mind in a list like this. I think he's playing the game understanding that and sort of factoring that in, which is kind of a weird thing to factor in, that you're basically handing over a VP every game. So I do agree that if you can remove him as your leader, then do so. I wonder if there's an easier way to do that. Is there Hunterworks? Why not instead switch, let's say, Yazneg, maybe Fimble, but possibly Yazneg for the Keeper, and then just do the same thing with his Warband. And then now, oh wait, no, Keeper's Fortitude, isn't he? Yeah, never mind. That's not even going to work.
I think I prefer the Keeper, like Evan said, actually, because when you look at it like this, right? He has the 2 might, and even if you wanted to go on the Witch King route, that's fine as well.
Keeper is 3 might.
That's not, well, I'm saying the Lingering Shadow is 2 might. I'm sorry. And so without the special rule, he needs a 3-up to stay alive. Like you said, if he dies, you give up, or if he takes a wound, you give up a point right there. And with only 2 might, if you do enough wounds to him, well, no, it doesn't really matter how many wounds you do, actually, because as long as he's dead, he's dead. It doesn't really matter. He doesn't have to roll per thing. I think I'd probably go with...
Another thing with the Keeper is if you kill him on the last turn of the game, then I'm fairly sure the way that was FAQ'd is he does count as dead because he's not on the table.
No. Really?
Shadow.
Yeah,
the Lingering Shadow?
I mean... The Ring Wraith, right? If you kill the
yeah.
Ring Wraith, you roll at the beginning of the next turn.
So you can't lose him on the last turn.
If the game ends on that turn, he's off the table. He hasn't rolled yet. I'm fairly sure the way that was FAQ'd was that he counts as dead.
I don't know. We have to check that FAQ. But let's say this. If the FAQ is true and what Evan says is true, then that makes it, you definitely don't want this guy as your leader because he's so easy to kill every turn. And I get it. Like, you can get him out of harm's way, but you don't really know when the game is going to end. Like, some players know very well how to manipulate game endings. So I would then strongly agree that that's a problem if that FAQ is in that favor. Now, if it's not, and it's ruled that he's still technically there, he just hasn't been rolled to see if he's actually dead, then I'm still a little okay with all you're forfeiting is 1 point for leader wounds. A little okay with it. It's not favorable, I'll admit, but I understand you're just trying to get this Wraith in your list.
I really like the idea, though, what Evan said with the Keeper instead of Lingering, and then you swap Yazneg for Narzug. You keep your leader points alive with Narzug in the back, kind of just staying back there. You then get a second hero to do a lot of damage at Fight 5, Strength 5, +1 to wound. So it gives you another hero. So then instead of going from 6 might, you now have 9 might you can use on the battlefield. Because I know to Devin's point where he said, the Lingering Shadow was using his might to stay alive. Now you have 9 might to use on the field, which is way above average at 600 points. So I actually really like the idea of what
it is. A stronger list. I will say that, Patrick, that this list is much stronger with the Keeper as your general. I understand the desire to use the Lingering Shadow because I love using him. And I've seen the shenanigans he pulls and the fact that he can really harass the backlines. But for him to actually harass the backlines, you need someone within that 6-inch range to call the heroic move because you don't want him doing it. And because otherwise, basically they just kind of, grab someone and put it on him, and then he doesn't really harass the backlines anymore. He's never going to kill anything. Or if he does, if you're lucky. And so his real job is to grab a wizard or grab someone who needs to move to do something or something of that nature, or to I don't know, act like a bat swarm almost. So the list does actually become stronger taking Evan's advice. I will also say, I guess it's not too much of a big deal. But so in Maelstrom, everyone's going to have to pile around the Lingering Shadow because you have your banner in his warband as well. You have critical components to your list, I think, especially in, what's it called? The Maelstrom mission where a banner actually gives you points. But with the Keeper, you actually could spend his might to just go somewhere else. Whereas the Lingering Shadow, you don't want to do that. The Lingering Shadow is like, nope, I need to keep my might. I'm not doing anything. So y'all have to come to me. So I just think for that other reason, the Keeper does shine a little bit better in the fact that it gives you a little bit more flexibility in those type of missions.
Can I just add the FAQ related stuff? We didn't even have to check the FAQ. At the bottom of the rule, it says, if when the game ends, a marker is in play and the corresponding Nazgul is not on the board, that Nazgul will count as having been slain for the purposes of victory conditions.
There you go.
Okay.
That answers that. Yeah. I would definitely take Evan's advice then.
Yeah.
That is way too much of a risk. It is so easy to kill the Lingering Shadow. You do not want these guys as your leader if you can absolutely avoid it. I mean, if you're playing a full Dual Gildor list and for some reason you just have all these guys, then cool. But that's something I would avoid.
So also, I'm just throwing stuff out here. This is another idea I had is, so another problem with this list is obviously shooting is going to suck against you. And the fact that the only heroic march you have is on a guy who is either one, not going to be on the board, or two, probably going to be sitting in the middle of the forest in the middle of nowhere. So you don't have march.
Just to clarify, when you say it sucks against him, you mean that it's a highly effective against his list.
Yes,
that's what you're saying.
He
just in case someone
fun time with shooting.
I just wanted to clear that for the audience because some people might have been like, "Oh, what is he highly resistant to shooting?"
So I think a way you could solve your leader problem, give you that heroic march, and maybe even give a little bit of I guess that Lingering Shadow feel teleporting around sort of thing. You could drop the Lingering Shadow, keep everything else the same, take a Gundabad or captain with shield from Azog's Legion, and then swap the spiders out for warbats. And then you get the ability to fly over somebody's lines. You get extra movement, actually, 12 inches. And you also get a defense 7, decently bulky leader with heroic march, so he can move that stuff around very quickly. And you sort of drop the Mirkwood spiders, which I don't think 2 Mirkwood spiders are going to do a whole lot for the list, honestly. So that's another option.
And that is going to probably feel bad for him to do because you could tell that he started this off as a Dual Gildor idea and then branched it into what makes it more effective. Because if you take that out, the Dual Gildor element is gone. And that I feel like with him having made the Lingering Shadow his leader, that's kind of what he's going for. I agree about the bats. It is honestly, once again, a more effective version of this list. So it sucks to say, I mean, if you watch our review on Dual Gildor, we're all not really great fans of its competitive abilities. So unfortunately, the more you take Dual Gildor out of this equation, the more you're kind of helping yourself. And I have to agree that that's also going to be a better idea. Even in a standard game, now you're at 8 points of might. You're getting now your guys with heroic strike freed up to never call a heroic move, even in close quarters games. Now the captains for that, and the bats. If I have to say their weight versus a spider, I'm probably going to say the bats have a lot more threat than just because of their ability to fly over things. I know those spiders are super maneuverable, but flying over things is like the king in this game. Anything with fly in this game is insane.
Also, the Mirkwood spiders, especially, they have those huge bases, so they're not very maneuverable at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main comparison is their ability to paralyze models, but the models they can paralyze. It's like a gimmick. What do you need? 6s? Well, 5s. You need 5. So
5s, and if you move 6s, which you're normally going to be using them as throwing weapons, so it probably is going to be 6s.
Which means for every 3 you shoot, you get 50% chance, if I'm doing that math right, of actually getting one guy down.
On average, every 3 turns of them shooting out webs, they'll get 1, which
could be stopped by fate.
Yeah. So it's 1, not reliable, and it's just not something you really should.
I want to clarify. On. We're not saying the Mirkwood spiders are bad. We're just saying that if you're trying to get what it looks like you're trying to get out of this list, I think the bats might be better suited for what you're going for. But I think when you compare the bats with the spiders, the bats are generally going to be better.
So are you guys happy with the numbers, troops in this? I think it's, what is it? It is
37, I think.
30. Yeah, okay, 37.
Yeah, at 600, it's probably fine, honestly.
It's not bad at 600. It's actually pretty reasonable because even the standard at 700 is 39.
Okay. So I think, Patrick, those are our main thoughts of, I like Devin discussed, if you're really interested in keeping it Dol Guldur, maybe, do your best to try to keep maybe the spiders in if you really want them to, but we recommend swapping them out for a bat swarm. We definitely recommend
Gundabad bats. So just to clarify, your options are either the captain with the Gundabad bats or keeper with the Mirkwood spiders, which I think, if I'm going to guess, me and Evan are both on the side of the Azog's Legion route, getting the captain with the bats just for the march and the Okay,
so one of those. Consider maybe swapping Yazneg for Fimble if you wanted to make him.
Yazneg for Fimble, so
Yazneg for Narzug if you wanted to do a better leader route to keep him in the back and keep him more protected if you felt like doing that. But let us know if you use this list and how you do with it, or if you take any of our thoughts into consideration. We're going to move into the main topic for today, which is the Q&A. So our first question is from Joe Heron, and his question is, what are some of the interesting legendary legions you'd like to see in future supplements? Some examples he gives are the Last Alliance, Mirkwood Spiders, Fangorn Forests, saying maybe using terrain as a part of the army combined with Ents. Does anybody have anything from the movies that they'd like, movies or books, that they'd like to see a part of the game?
All right, so actually, just so everyone can see our shining faces, I guess after we read the question, we'll just take it down. But I guess as far as me for legendary legions, one, he actually mentioned one I do want to see is Ents. Why do they not have Ent upgrades? I want a Willow tree.
What if they made like little Ent troops that were like half trolls but like more expensive?
Hurons, the Hurons. That's what everyone always brings up is the little. If I'm saying that right, is it Horn or Huron? Someone in the comment section will rip me to shreds.
Call them Hurons based on the current character in Lord of the Rings.
There you go. I'm going to call them Hurons, and all you Tolkien buffs out there can cringe. But that's one I would like to see, and I think it's too late for it. If I'm being honest, I think the War in Rohan would have been it. I think that's gone. I can't see another supplement bringing that in, but so if I'm going to talk about then one that I see coming, and then I'll pass it to someone else here, is a Legion. I'm trying to think. We've hit all the movie stuff, haven't we?
I think a Cond Legion is required. Something with Cond.
Why do you say
that? You know what I mean?
He just wants Khan to be.
Yeah, well, I just think it's a shame that there's like 3 ginormous banners on top of a chariot with a king, and they still don't count towards the banner points in scenario.
Right?
Yeah.
Khan literally has more banners than every other army in the game, and they have no banner at all.
So like outside of Khan 2, I think it'd be cool to have something Grey Havens themed with Kurdan. I don't know. I just like,
you'd have to release new miniatures for that.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess we can say, in a perfect world where all the miniatures you would want would exist, then Grey Haven's thing. So
I wouldn't mind seeing, and I know that they've kind of covered this, so it's probably not going to come out. I wouldn't mind seeing like an all evil attack on Minas Tirith kind of legendary legion where you had you had to take Suladan, you had to take Gothmog. you had to take some form of Easterlings, that kind of a route and then they got some special bonus where if you took X amount from this, you got this and this. I'd like to see that where, I have to take Mordor, Harad, and Easterlings into my...
Like a Battle of the Five Army combo.
Yeah, kind of something like that. I'd like to see something like, and I know that they've already covered that kind of area, so I don't think that they'll do it, but I would really like to see that personally.
Actually, on the subject of cans, wouldn't it be cool if there was a legion which was entirely mercenaries, and then you can actually ally this legion to something else? So same as back in the day, we had I think there was a Canish mercenary horseman, which were 9 points, and at fight 4 at the start of the game, you roll the dice. If you rolled a 1, you weren't going to use the model for the game. So then,
I do like that. I do like, because especially you cannot ally conned horsemen into any faction unless it's Easterlings.
Yeah.
And they are in the books, they're mercenary horsemen that Sauron just hired. Here, I'm going to pay you, you're going to fight for my side. So it would be cool if you're say any evil faction at the Pelennor Fields can add a warband with a chieftain or a king in it. And they have to have at least let's say 10 models or something like that, which would be cool. Or even give a Condish legendary legion the rules like Sharky. How Sharky comes onto the board and he can fight right away. Yeah. Give the Condish horsemen that, make them a little more competitive in a sense. But before I forget, Osgiliath veterans. An Osgiliath legendary.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
And making them actually competitive. Yeah.
Have a Boromir and Faramir, and they have to be unmounted or something like that. Yeah. But they give big boosts to the veterans and stuff.
That would actually be a stellar legion. I think a lot of people would play that. So that's a good show.
Shield wall, just.
Well, I don't even know if you would give them shield wall because they don't fight like that. Yeah, they don't fight they're kind of like this ragtag group running around a city.
You could,
but I do think it would be cool.
Like a 6-inch hatred of
orcs
rule
or something.
They kind of they could support each other without having to have a spear or something like that.
Goblin Town, yeah.
Well, it's not. Some could call it something different. I don't know. Just something.
No, you could be urban warfare special room, and then they
maybe their heroes count as a 6-inch banner or something like that. So
or hatred of orcs or something.
Now I have this horrible image in my mind of Goblin Town veterans who get a bunch of fight value boosts when they're within 6 inches of the Goblin King, and that sounds horrible.
And that's basically Boromir.
As of right now, giving anything extra to Goblin Town has to be a gimmick, otherwise it's overpowered. It's
Now, what do you guys? Because I know I've heard some people talk about this. What do you guys think about maybe Lothlorien getting something?
Oh, of course. You know what? It's actually criminal that they've been ignored this long.
I think they could because you have this theme, War in the North, probably coming out, and you have all these battles fought outside of Minas Tirith arena. So we all forget that Lothlorien was under siege.
They were involved, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe involved. Give them Defenders of the Woodland Realm,
we're probably looking actually at our first Lothlorien Legion, maybe in the upcoming supplement. Fingers crossed, but that's what I'd imagine.
Tell us, Devin. We'll torture you.
You know what actually is, so this is a legendary legion I really was hoping would happen, but I don't think it ever will. And I think it's for a reason, a Grey Company Legion. Now I know that sounds weird because it exists, but I'm talking about real Grey Company. I'm talking about all mounted, proper Grey Company. You know why I think they didn't do it? If in my personal opinion, why they made the mounted ones suck so much that they're unplayable is because they don't make the model. And, Diwali does and other companies do. But in a perfect world, GW now makes that model. I want to see better profiles for the Grey Company. And I'd run a 30-man Legion, make them cheap enough where you can actually get 30 in a reasonable 700-point list. Plus, higher points would get you Halberad and all that, That I think would be really fun.
Isn't that basically Rangers of Ithilien, except all mounted and with might?
You'd have to.
Fighting everything.
You are right that it actually now that as you say it like that is pretty.
Yeah, we've had other episodes like Ithilien's horrible. Don't bring it. It should be downgraded.
Now,
and Devin's let's put them on horses
with might.
let's make a bunch of boats. Let's take Rohan and combine it with Rangers of Ithilien.
You know what? If there's a way to do it, now we know GW won't do it because they have the bow on the model. But make a ranger without a bow on the horse. I don't know, and then don't give them bows. I was thinking of the combat version of them where they'd use might to like swing in and all that. But you're right; it probably is a terrible idea. Maybe they didn't make that Legion because it would have been a nightmare to play, and so they all right.
They just
fair
sound
shout.
like better Rivendell Knights now that I think about it.
Yeah, no,
So
actually,
maybe
the
not
more I
that
think about it,
Legion.
it's actually a terrible idea.
Yeah, so
There you go. That's why I don't write the rules of the game, people.
12.
If anyone's listening, stop listening at that exact moment and just move on to the next part.
If you were to actually take it as Rivendell Knights, then technically, if let's say you have 16 Rivendell Knights and like 800 point list, then if you these days just get like 15 Rangers of the North on horses, that's already 600. Then you just add a hero, and then that's your Legion anyway. So just play with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I had the image of the actual Great Company. I'm like, I want to play the real Great Company with zero forethought into what it would be like in the game. I just was like, I just want to see it. All right, I'll think of something else. That was a terrible idea.
I mean, I imagine most of us have the same opinion on this, but surely they will eventually do a Last Alliance one, though, right? Like they're going to have to.
So
do
I have
one.
a theory on
Yeah,
that as
they're
well.
waiting for the Amazon, I'm sure.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, you
my
think they're
theory.
waiting to? Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
Because then they can
why-
release so much.
You can make a Legion now and then have a book, create all these profiles, and suddenly the Amazon series comes out and it has a whole different set of stuff. And it's like, all right, like I think you wait, see when that comes out.
Yeah, especially since they just got rid of one of the actors, I think, who was playing one of the roles, one of the major roles. So I think until that series actually comes out, like who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think Last Alliance is not there yet. So
I definitely hope to see the Mirkwood. I would like to see Mirkwood spiders as well. I think that'd be a cool little thing to see. A bunch of spiders on the table just doing their thing. I mean, I would definitely play Mirkwood spiders if they created a legendary legion that was worth using.
Remember that game, Tim, that you played against?
Oh gosh, Jesse, that was fun. I mean, so for anyone who doesn't know, I'll make it very quick. He took pretty much an all spiders force, and what was great was he put googly eyes on the spiders, so they just looked ridiculous, but it was so great.
I tried to buy that army from him. I'm like, I want to buy this.
It was like
great.
beautifully painted, and then we were like, Jesse, put googly eyes on that, and he was like, no, I'm not gonna. And then we showed up and there was googly eyes, and we were like, what a boss. Like,
if you've ever wondered how do you make something both terrifying and fun, you put googly eyes on Mirkwood spiders.
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
And it is phenomenal to play against, honestly. So I think that kind of answers the legendary legions. So we'll move on to the next one, which is by I'm gonna mispronounce this name, Yannick or Janik, or I don't know how to say it. I'm gonna say Yannick.
Yeah.
I'll say Yannick Windish. And I'll direct this directly to you, Devin. Hello, I just learned about Chaos and Arda. I really want to play with my friends, but I can't find the cards. How can I get to them?
So I want everyone to know that I didn't know this question was coming up. This is not a shameless plug to the cards I sell. But
It is true. I did not tell him about this.
No, but basically, for those who don't know, Chaos and Art is actually a game that I invented, or you can have a 4-way free-for-all in Lord of the Rings, and it's played at Articon, fittingly so, and it's really chaotic, really, really fun, and hasn't been updated since the new edition came out. However, I gave the cards to Jay in advance and asked him, is anything going to be overridden here from the new edition? And provenly so, it wasn't. And he said it wasn't going to be. They would all be fine. So as of right now, I have, I don't know, 30 decks left. And I have zero intention of making any more at the moment. I think maybe if me and James Clark work something out, then, you know, I'll make another deck run if there's interest in the community, if that's what everyone wants. We made a professional set of cards. But basically, if you want one of these last remaining 30, then, or many of the last remaining 30, however many you want, you just email me at dchobbitleague@gmail.com, and, you know, I'll go ahead and send you the PayPal address, and you PayPal me to, Jesus, I have to look at it to $40 or something, and maybe 25. I forgot the price. Don't quote me. I have to look it up. So just email me on what it was. I don't advertise them at all, so that's why I haven't sold any. a while, but they are very expensive to produce, and it was intended just to be a fun thing for the community in that one-time thing. So as of right now, this is recording this video, you can buy them that way. When they're gone, I don't know. Maybe someone else will make a version of it, or maybe I'll print a new edition of it. But that's pretty much how you would right now.
And then in about 20 years, once you're all gone, it's gonna be like magic cards or like some sort of baseball trading cards.
Yeah, right. They'll be super valuable. See, Chaos and Arda decks, people be like, they're rare limited edition. Devin's not buying them, making them anymore.
It's a first edition card.
Yeah,
and now we're in like 5th edition.
You know what? They were really expensive to make, and they were really fun. I would say that, but it was what did they cost me to produce them all? $3,000. And so realistically, the cards were sold at a price. It was $20. That's right. They were $20 decks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, they were sold at a price. So that way I was like, all right, if I sell X amount, I'll make the money back after like 2/3 or some formula I worked out were sold, which is all I expected to be sold. But actually I sold the majority of them. So technically profit, but I don't want to turn that into a profit industry. It just was a fun game that I created. So, but yeah, we'll see. We'll say if I make any more. Maybe all of this podcast can, we can all fly to each other one day when this whole COVID era is over and make it the game again and make some cool, fun new edition, because it's a really fun game. Mick, have you ever played Chaos and Arda?
I have never played it.
You have never played it? All right. It's actually, I think you're the only one on the podcast.
I remember turning up at Ardacon, and then everyone else was playing. I was like, it's okay. I'll just wait for the doubles. I don't really know what's going on here, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's a crazy. You're deploying everywhere, and there's random effects, and there's cards you can play to make things happen, like different. Like it's absurd what happens. I mean, there's cards that'll pluck your models from the field and redeploy them in Maelstrom deployment. Like it's pretty nuts. So it's a lot of fun. And it's totally random and chaotic. And for that reason, generally the best army almost never wins. So because everyone starts ganging up on that army and playing cards, it just gets insane.
Yeah, so it's very much just Chaos and Arda. Like it's like if you just want to like throw dice, it's a good thing to do.
Well,
it's definitely a beer and pretzels game. Definitely that.
I know you've kind of explained how to get it, but like a very quick. Would you be able to explain like what exactly it is with the cards and how the deployment is, just in case anybody is interested and has never heard of it before?
Yeah. So really fast, it's a 400-point game where you have 4 players playing 400 points. You play Maelstrom. So everyone deploys in Maelstrom. There's 5 objectives on the board, and you basically score points by playing cards that have secures for those objectives. Generally, every player has 3 cards in their hand at the beginning of every turn. So you just draw however many just to get back up to 3. And then the cards either have cards where you can play something to create an effect on the field, or it's a scoring point. And some of them are silly. Like some of them are like score objective 5. And so now you're rushing to objective 5. But some of them are like, don't have a model within an enemy. Don't have any friendly model within an enemy model within 6 inches of any enemy model. Or like there's one called Entmoot, which rewards you for having not done anything that turn. Like literally nothing. If you do it. So there's one that's like, what is it? It makes you jump off a cliff. And if you didn't take falling damage, then you score a point for that. It's ridiculous stuff, and it's really themed around the movies. You'll see lots of quotes from the movies, and that's what makes it a lot of great fun, because suddenly opponents will pivot and change sides based on what's favoring them. So you're working like, if us were playing Chaos and Arda, I'll be working with Evan the whole time, because right now my cards favor what he's doing, and then suddenly I draw new cards that now it's like, oh, it's better if I backstab you now. And so that happens very frequently, where people backstab each other and make new alliances and negotiate, and it's really funny. So,
all right. So we'll move on to our next question for today. It is from Leon K. I'll move it to Mick shortly after this, because I know Mick talked to him about this, but I'll just read the question real quick. He asks, I'd say that I know the rules very well and know most of the special tricks, like dismounting your Warg Rider at Recon, for example. But I never get more than 3 wins in an event, even though I take strong lists. I won some one-day events by winning all 3 games. There's still strong opponents, but as soon as I go to 2-day events, I struggle to get out of the middle of the field table. Do you have any ideas of what I could do to change this? And he asks, in case that was too specific, which tips would you have for mid-level player trying to become a top-level player, especially if you don't have the option to play lots of games because you don't have a big competitive community and or simply not a lot of free time. And the last question he has is, he was thinking about sticking to one army for at least one season to become better. And he asked, would that be a good idea? He says they have a lot of good versus evil events. So if I took only one army, my opponent would always be allowed to choose which of his two armies he will use against me. Would he still only take one army for the whole season, or would you take one good and one evil for the whole season?
Okay, so I think a lot of people are going to be confused. So there's three questions here. We're going to start with one and then move on down. So the first question is, and I'm thinking that top one is not it is a question. Says he knows the rules very well, but he never gets any more than 3 wins with any list, and he's wondering how he can change that. Okay, so I think
So hold on, because I actually replied to him earlier in the week, and I just wanted to elaborate on a couple of things. So I basically asked him, what do you think is it that makes you win 3 out of 3 on a 1-day event, but only 3 out of 6 on a 2-day event? And I asked if he runs into the very best players at 2-day events. Is it fatigue? Is it just pressure? Or is there something else? Because like ideally, you sort of want to identify the problem in order to figure out what it is. So he then just added that he would say that the small events he attends still have some very competitive players, so it's not necessarily easier to win 1-day events over 2-day events. But then maybe they aren't as focused or prepared as people may be for big events. And then pressure and expectation are probably a factor. Although he feels that he feels some pressure when he has to play against big name players. And then he doesn't think fatigue is a factor. Although I would generally stress that fatigue is very often a factor.
It's often.
Yeah, I think this, before we start, like, his situation is not unique to him. Like, you see the same thing in the United States. We're at probably in the UK too, or other places. You have a lot of 3-day events in the States, and you have a lot of people placing first, second, third. But then once it comes to like 5 or 6 game events, you probably have a handful of people that are always there, always winning. So just right off the bat, like, your situation is not unique to yourself. It's overall everywhere.
Actually, a mixed point, fatigue is huge. And that was actually what I was going to say is we actually encountered that at Nova, where we ran a 6-round tournament for the first time ever. Normally it's 5.
Matt and I almost fell asleep. Like, we were like, whose turn is it? I have no idea. Like, what is even going on?
It crushed people. There was one player who actually just said, hey, look, I had fun. I got to leave in round 5. It was the first time we ever did that, and it's mostly because Americans aren't used to 6-day tournaments. And I remember we went to Arda for the first time. Yeah, in the UK, that's like standard. You guys are doing 7
game, not 6 days.
No, 6 rounds. 6 rounds. Sorry, I apologize.
6 days, 6
I
games
apologize,
each day.
Yes. 6 round tournaments. So we did our first 5, and the UK, they practice regularly at 6 and 7, and so their stamina is a lot more built for this. And actually, my stamina went up greatly for that because I keep visiting and playing in UK events. I go back to the States now, and I'm much better now at these longer 2-day events. And so, I would say fatigue is huge on that one. May not be for your specific case, though, because Mick, you said that he thought fatigue wasn't an answer. He thought that it's the big name players is what it for him, right?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of fatigue, there's also the situation where, for example, from my own experience, if let's say I place against a really good player in like round 2, and there's like another round to go in the day, and then there's another day to go, then it's a big difference versus playing that really good player in like round 5 or 6, because like after playing someone like Ed or Jay or Will Champion or any of those really really good players, I'm always like, okay, I'm pretty much dead physically and emotionally, and I just need to like really, really drink some coffee, eat something. I can't really do anything else. So I don't know. It just for me personally, that has always been a factor.
Yeah, I would say also the factor in fatigue when you have these 2-day tournaments, the longer when you have a 3-round event, the odds of you fighting a very skilled opponent is far less than those 6-round events. In fact, in a 6-round event,
Well, it sort of depends how big the event is, because if let's say there's only like 6
that's true.
of the
Yeah.
events, then actually, like
assuming a 20-man tournament, I would say that your odds of fighting, because you're right. If the player base is smaller, then that changes things. But if your tournament size is, let's say, a little too big, let's say it's 20 people for 3 rounds, which I think is too big.
Yeah.
If you divide it down, I think it's too big. So that means that your odds of fighting the best player in the room is actually pretty low. But whereas 6-round, it's guaranteed if you keep winning. And so the opponents you're fighting against get harder and harder progressively. And so I think it's still, once again, factoring into fatigue. You even mentioned it yourself with the big players, to Mick, those names. Yeah, sure, there's intimidation, which is factoring into fatigue, but I think your mind is slowly wearing out from making too many difficult decisions, which that's a thing. That's an actual thing. Decision fatigue. It is an actual thing. So, and so I think that's probably the biggest reason for most people. And probably you might be surprised if this includes yourself, that you're wearing out on a longer event.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, we've sort of milked this whole like what's going wrong sort of thing dry. So let's start giving solutions now.
Sure.
So the first thing I would definitely say
eat your breakfast.
Yes, eat your breakfast.
No, this is real advice. That's not a joke.
This is just a joke. Like, I know, obviously I'm not over 21, so I'm not staying up all night drinking, but I know a lot of people do at tournaments, especially 2-day tournaments. And I think
that's why Evan
may
wins
also
everything.
Be part of the reason why you guys are having such problems with 2-day tournaments, is because in a 1-day tournament, you show up, you haven't been filling yourself up with alcohol. You haven't had a 2-hour sleep the night before. You haven't skipped breakfast. But in a 2-day tournament, usually you're spending time with other people. And if you want to win, then unfortunately you're going to have to be a normal human being and get 8 hours
to the
of sleep.
Team Knots. The entire Team Knots has a tradition of getting hammered the night before.
No, but it does work in that way, because I remember
it is true. It's
at Ardacon, the time last time it actually went on, like Jacob and I don't drink, and like the day after we just felt really crisp, and we could tell by our opponents, even on top tables, the super competitive ones where they're from Belgium, the UK, we were like, okay, like I can tell this guy's had a rough night. Like let me kind of exploit that. Not in a manipulative way, but like you can like tell they're going to make more mistakes and stuff. So,
and this is very true. I've noticed my playing ability drastically reduces with drinking. And so the night before, so I actually have a rule. I don't drink until I know I'm not going to, like, if I've like lost 3 games or something, I'm like, all right, whatever, I guess I'll drink now. But eating that water, have water throughout your games, take a break, an actual break in between games. Try not to think too much. I know it sounds weird, but some people will go and analyze other games, and I imagine that's adding to your. You think not?
No, I agree with you. Like I even wouldn't. I see people counting victory points while they're playing too. I don't even do that. Like just go play the game and play to win. Don't put any pressure on yourself and stuff, and like play it out. But I do have like one more that you can prep. What I do when I attend major tournaments like Nova or Articon, the day before I lay out my models per war bands, because I'm very visual, and I see exactly what is in each war band. And then if you have that laid out structure, like even when you shelve your army before Nova, put them in their war band respectively, so you know exactly, you have that visualness of, I know what this is going to do. I know what this is going to do. I know what this is going to do. And it really helps me. But like I'm visual, so that helps me. And then one more tip in game, it's a resource game. So always never end the game with might on your heroes. Always spend all your might, and always try to take out your opponent's might. Even if, like, for example, I remember Devin, you and I played North Carolina, and I sacrificed a Khandish king on chariot to get into Dalgamir. That's me sacrificing a 125 point model to your 75 point model. But the purpose was then I won the mic game, if you remember that. Because it looked kind of strange, but it was like,
well, no, you had the cavalry based army. It was a good idea.
Yeah. So like,
you need
do
the
those
might
things,
advantage. Yeah.
Know where the resources are in the scenario, know where the resources are in your opponent's army and yours, and play it like chess, like sacrifice your bishop for a rook, do those type of things.
If you're not already doing this, track your opponent's might. I cannot tell you enough. Like, you need to reiterate every reason that they are spending a might to them, back to them, repeat it. Like, every word that they said, okay, you're spending a point of might for a heroic strike with Boromir, and you're repeating it, and you mark it down, track them. That's going to be another thing. You're talking about also these tricks and tips, like, the dismounting your warg and all that. Those are gimmicks. Those are not required to win tournaments. They are a cool little trick that will surprise you the first time that it's done on you, and then you'll surprise someone the first time you've done it on them. And then after that, I mean, people adjust to those. It's something you should know. That really comes with practice and experience, but it's not required to win a game. I've salvaged games with those tricks, but I'm not sure that I've ever maybe I have done a gotcha, and that's how I win all my games. It's like just a bunch of gotchas on this podcast. It's like, I didn't know I could dismount my warg and get the points that way. Like, no, it's more like a thing you can do. And the first time it happens, you'll be surprised, but not again. So I wouldn't focus too much on that. That comes down to the practice element. I think he also said he doesn't have players in his community.
Well, he asks if you don't have a big competitive community and or simply not a lot of free time.
Okay, if he doesn't so that's all.
I have some advice on this one, actually.
Sure.
This is what Jesse and I did when we had new players and stuff. We played cookie cutter lists against them, or even cookie cutter lists against each other when we're training for a tournament. Like, you bring your A game list, I'll bring a cookie cutter list, and you play with the cookie cutter list, like Gondorians, basic anything captains or something, and you play as hard as you can. And that's how I kind of learned the game, is another player practicing on me and me just being like, no, I'm going to destroy you with this crap list. Like, I'd even sometimes we'd bring 50 points less and try to beat each other. But that's how we as a group got really good, because we kind of pride ourselves on, we know the fundamentals of wargaming, because we just go to the basics and we play with the basics. And once you know the basics, boom, okay, now I can add a dragon and do all the shenanigans. Now I can, as a wizard, do all the shenanigans. But learn those basics and the pace of the game, and it'll really help.
Yeah, it's actually similar to what I did with my teammate when we won the doubles GT in the UK about 10 years ago. It was essentially, we would come up with lists, and then we go, okay, these are like 5 or 6 expected lists which people will be bringing. Let's play this list against this one. If we lost, okay, well, let's just change the list. Okay, we've beaten it. Next, let's play it against this list. Okay, well, we've lost. Let's just change our list, and then repeat the process up until you're able to beat all of the lists which you think will come. So then
exactly,
it was quite a long process, but essentially it just requires you and one other person to go, okay, well, let's come up with a list. Let's throw it against a bunch of other things, and then this way you're actually learning to play all these other lists. And so then you start finding out what all those other lists are actually capable of doing. Sometimes you might be afraid of oh yeah, well, that's sort of a list with the Balrog or something. And then once you start playing the Balrog, you're like, well, the Balrog doesn't really have might. It can get stuck. It's not that scary. So there are these situations where unless you play with other people's lists, you're not entirely sure what those things may be capable of doing to you.
Yeah, and you can especially, because I used to play Fellbeast all the time, and the way I got good with it, I'd tell my Philly friends, bring Lady of Light, bring Legolas, bring Aragorn, bring all Isildur, or who is it, Elendil, who can stop with magic. Yeah. Bring all these things that counter my army. I want to lose against you for fun, and do it with your friends if you don't have competitive players. Have them bring A tier lists, and you bring something simple. Because then once you come into the tournament, it's not like, oh, shoot, they have that army that's going to destroy my army. It's like, okay, I play this all the time. I just know how to mitigate that. and it gets this is how like what a lot of good players do. It catches players off guard, even good players, because they see the thing and they're like, wow, my army's tailored to take yours out. And in your head, you're like, I've actually played against this army because I know it's out there like 6 or 7 times. I know things to do to mitigate it. And he doesn't know, if that kind of makes sense.
So yeah, I want to bring up, sorry, Evan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, to summarize and sort of connect all these different threads, it is very, very important for you to, as much as possible, play against a player that is, one, either better than you skill-wise, or two, just as committed as you to getting better at the game. Because now I don't want to diss on people who aren't, trying super hard to be competitive players, because that's not how everybody plays the game. But you're not going to improve as much if you play against those players and just sort of beat them up all the time, as if you're playing against someone who's very committed to the game and plays tough lists against you and plays their best against you. So try your best to find, all you really need is one person who's very committed to the game. Try to find that person and then play them as much as possible. Do all the things that Rainier and Mick recommended earlier, because it's definitely going to help.
So I want to bring up one thing from earlier before, when Devin mentioned marking down might points and stuff like that. I have started doing this because this has come up a couple times in games as well. I recommend, as well as keeping track of might, will, and fate, write down what they used it for as well. And it might seem a little bit, I'm writing all this stuff down, but there have been multiple games in which I've said, well, look, you've used a point of might, and they go, well, when did I use it? And I go, oh crap, I don't have the exact moment that you use it, but maybe you say, okay, Boromir used 1 point of might for a heroic strike on turn 2. And even though it's a little bit annoying to write all that stuff down, if somebody questions it, you go, okay, well, look, on turn 2, he used it to call heroic strike. And 99% of people are going to be like, oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot. You
could shorthand it. I actually shorthand it. I'll just say strike 2. Like or the turn, or you can
write. I bubble it in, like I bubble it and I write like the name, bubble.
That's why I don't like using those trays where they like mark dice and stuff to mark what might, will, and fate. I don't like that because they can be easily bumped. Everything changes. So that's another reason. If you see your opponent using those, start tracking everything, because it's so.
You'll see the majority of us actually like the high end like competitions, like Tim, myself, Devin. We just have paper and pen, and we're writing it down. Just like I don't know, we're just writing everything down.
It's not to say that we don't, and I think this is the biggest thing that we're trying to reiterate with this as well. It's not that we don't trust what your opponent is saying. It's we're not going to get cheated out of a game unnecessarily.
But back to like it's 6 games, people get tired. But also Mick said he doesn't trust people. I don't trust people too.
Actually, there are people there are people worth not trusting.
Especially top players. They're like, oh shoot, I forgot.
You're entering a world. Yeah. Well, you're entering a realm where pride and ego start kicking in. And if you want to go into those competitive realms, you have to understand that that's going to, people will start, if they see they're losing, there's a temptation to start taking easy routes to victory. That will happen, even amongst players who are normally very honorable people. It's just that temptation is very great.
It's that precious, you want to just take it.
You're in a long game, and especially if it's up against a top player, it's mind, it really, as we say, it gets you very fatigued. So maybe you forget that moment, and so someone else forgets that they use that might, and that could be game changing if they had that extra point of might when that they didn't. But if you can't really bring up like when they used it or what they used it for, that could be a big difference. Because if I said to Rainier in a game, he said, I'm going to call heroic strike, and I said, well, no, you've already used your points of might, and he goes, well, I used 2 here. Where did I use the third one? It's not that he's saying, oh, well, I'm going to try to get away with a third. He might just genuinely have forgotten that he used his third point of might. And it's just really important that I think you mark down when they use their might and what they used it for. Very simply, like Devin said, maybe strike round 4. You know what I mean? And do it that way.
It's a way to to check out their resources too, because now you have a piece of paper, all of their heroes, and you know who has might.
Yeah.
And stuff, who has fate, who has will. And it's just like, it's very much tactical as well. Not just, of course, we don't trust people, but it's also very tactical.
Yeah.
Now, I want to bring up another, it was a question that we kind of been jumping around, which was one of his questions was, if you don't have the option to play lots of games and play in a community because you don't have free time, do you guys have any tips around if you're unable to play many games to help get
that
better?
is tough. I mean,
or is it more like you kind of have to play games to get better?
You really have to play.
I don't know, because like I
wouldn't say you have to.
I didn't play for the long. I didn't ever play. Then I came to that one Nova.
Yeah, but you're a weirdly talented player.
Well, okay, Mick, you said that you don't necessarily. What would you do to get better if you're unable to play games?
I mean, I've played so many games in the past where that like there is an amount of experience anyway. But I generally, let's say, just sometimes spend some time just writing lists, and just sometimes I might just sit on my Excel spreadsheets like in my free time, just changing some numbers, changing some things, and being like, oh yeah, this could be interesting. This could be interesting. So like, I have a spreadsheet with like 20 or 30 different lists, which I would like to try at some point, and I just like keep fiddling with them. I keep reading stuff. I keep listening to people talk, and so then whenever I even attend a tournament, I always just sort of walk around some tables and just watch other people playing and just figuring out some things. So
it doesn't have anyone to watch.
Well, no. I mean,
well, I would. So what I did is I like
go to a large tournament, let's say.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm just teasing, but yeah, I'm going off of that.
You could like watch, because what I did do is I did watch the YouTube.
That's what I was going to just say.
Yeah, and I did.
Okay,
I
so
I did
quick
watch
disclaimer on that though. Yeah, quick disclaimer on battle reports. All right, nobody understands this until you filmed a battle report. It is very difficult to film a battle report competitively. I have said multiple of my videos where we're going to do a competitive bat rep. We're going to pull all the shots. It is tough because you're thinking about so many different things. You lose focus of the game. So if you're going to watch a battle report, don't watch anyone's battle report on like YouTube. That's not the ones you want. The only battle reports are the ones where the two players actually playing the game have nothing to do with the filming. Warhammer World, Twitch streams, those are battle reports you want to watch. Those are tactical games. You don't watch the GBHL, the DCHL, none of it is so difficult to actually produce I mean, I watch my play on YouTube and I'm embarrassed and I'm just like, why did I make these mistakes? And then that's why I just stopped doing competitive bat reps, because I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to do them for fun now.
No, but I think by YouTube, you can also mean watch like podcast videos of competitive players. You could review their lists that they've actually won, and don't like, it's not like, okay, I'm gonna take that list because they took it, but like sample everybody and be like, oh wow, this player actually plays my play style with like what I want to build. Like, let me look at like what he builds and how he plays, he or she, and stuff like that. I mean, that's what I helped. I think when I started before I actually played the game, I saw they would interview some GBHL players, and I forget, there's this guy from Scotland.
No, not Scotland, Ireland. You're talking about Dave Nolan interviewing the competitive players?
But the guy was Reed.
Oh, David Reed.
David Reed. And he took what I had collected and I've never played.
Oh, was it the Harad episode?
Yeah, and I thought this is actually my play style in other strategy battle games. Yeah. And let me kind of like see how he plays and what he gets. And then I kind of did a little bit of that.
Oh yeah. I knew that like your list, obviously, back when we both Rainier and I played a whole lot of Felbeasts, our lists were I had Mordor with Felbeasts and a Shade, and he had Harad with Felbeasts and a Taskmaster and like 16 trillion Watchers of Karna. And I knew I'd seen that before somewhere, but yeah, that was David Reed's list.
It wasn't his list, but it was the idea of
I know he takes Golden King. You didn't take the Golden King.
No, but that's the thing. Like, see a player that plays what you play. Yeah. Because it's not like I see everyone on this show says Lady of Light. I've actually never played Lady of the Light.
You've
but that's
never
not
played Lady of Light?
never touched her.
He only likes
That
his
sounds-
evil
that
men.
sounds weird.
We already know this.
Yeah, I've never played her, but it's because that's not my style. Like my style is I like seeing armies that have a whole bunch of things distributed within them. That's dangerous, not one big thing. So like do that same thing. Look at these competitive players. Don't just be like, that looks competitive, I'm going to play that. Think of your own style and how you want to make it work. And like even in the question you asked, you said, oh, should I take one army, two armies? I suggest take a good and evil and perfect them. That's what I did. My Philly crew like makes fun of me for it. You'd make fun of me for it, Devin, because like I used to, for 1 year, I just played like one list build. But then I learned the mechanics because it was my first year playing. And then I could go onto other armies and do well with those because like I just learned the core rules with one.
So that's a good point to take into. So which is his final question. Do you think sticking to one army for one season to become better is a good idea? And would you go to the one army or one good, one evil?
So I'll start with that one actually, because I actually am very fascinated with this question, and I got it from actually Jay Clare and Ed Ball, who are kind of like two of the titans in the GBHL, where you see Ed Ball play the same list over and over and over again, generally the same three, and Jay switches it up every tournament. And I adopted Jay's sort of style of switching up every tournament. That's what I do here in the U.S. And I can say there's a lot of advantages of it because very little will surprise me at a certain point. Like if I've never played the army, as like Rainier saw with the Corsairs, then I play it terribly. and
then, like, he's making mistakes.
Yeah. So I'll play it terribly, but you learn, okay, all right, the fundamentals of each army and such. But I'll have to say that I think if you really want to probably more guarantee your success, you probably don't want to do that. I think it's a testament to Jay's skill that he can do that. I think it's a testament to anyone's skill if they can do it. But I think that if you actually focus kind of one play style, I'm going to say that it's not that you got to stay in Harad, but like a style of play. If you like shooting armies and you like it the way this plays out, then stick with that one style for a long time if you want to guarantee success for a season. Maybe next season you switch it up to something else, but don't switch from Rohan to Arnor shield walls to, it's just so many different play styles in your head, magical armies and stuff. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And that gives you like the experience of, okay, if you get like a bow army and just play a bow army, or like an elite, only an elite, then you get more experience playing against their weaknesses because you're constantly playing new armies at a tournament. And it kind of gets that experience that you want more of. Oh, sorry, Evan.
Yes. So, yeah, I was just going to say, I think I have a bit of an idea of what they're talking about here. So I used to, when I first got into the game, I played everything. Like any list I had, I would take it out, I would play with it. And, sometimes I might do fairly well, but usually I just sort of end up in the mid tables. And then about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, back in the old edition, I started taking double Fell Beast armies, and I was only taking double Fell Beast armies. And
everyone hated you for it.
They didn't hate me, but I
not
definitely,
you. Not you. The double Fell Beast back in the day. Fell Beast.
Absolutely.
That was brutal.
People hated that. But it worked. It worked extremely well. Like the first time I took a double Fell Beast army was actually to Ardacon, the second one, and I got fourth there. So it did well. And I think the next one I got like maybe fifth at Nova or something like that. So like partially double Fell Beasts are ridiculously strong, and using a stronger list was well for me.
Yeah,
worked well for me, and partially because I just had so much practice using the same list over and over again, and I really improved from that, I'd say.
Yeah, and I'd like to restate, like, learn the fundamentals, because there's no gimmick list that just wins it unless you're playing like 500 or 600 points with Rangers of Athelion or Goblin Town. Like, you need to know like how might works. You need to know how we talked about how your opponent uses their resources on a pen. You got to track that. Like, those fundamental things, I feel now personally in the new edition, are more important than I need to bring these key ingredients to make like this masterful thing. Like go to the basics in a way, like just learn how to play the game.
The other advice I would say, from my experience, like I played Saruman in all of the old editions for probably like 8 or 9 years. Where
it
was basically every tournament I would go to, I had to have a really good reason not to play Saruman, and so it was essentially the lists were changing around Saruman, but Saruman always stayed the same. So let's say I would take him with a horde of Rohan warriors. Then a different tournament, I would take him with some high elves, then with some Gondar. And so essentially, the core strategy was how do I utilize this one or two models here? And everything else changes according to what sort of I'm expecting to be good at certain points levels. So let's say in one of the old editions, I want to have like a 60 model army with Saruman. Okay, so I just took Warriors of Rohan. At the same time as all the double Felbies were super popular, I thought, well, Saruman is good against that, and I'll take High Elves because they are 5/5. And so suddenly you're sort of changing other aspects of the army, but like your core remains the same. And so you really learn how to play that core, but then everything else is adaptable, and you can adjust to what you feel like you're going to be facing. It's like at 500 points, you're going to be facing different things than what you're going to be facing at 800 points. But that core idea can still work at both as long as you have the supporting elements for it.
So I guess the answer from all of us is play the same army or same-ish type of army at minimum. Yeah, ish type, And I guess I'll add one last thing for competitive that we all didn't mention, but I think all of us can agree it's crucial is learn how to utilize time as a weapon in this game. And that is really what, in my experience, separates a lot of the toughest opponents that I play from the mid-tier, is they really analyze time. And I'm not talking about slow play. Technically there's an element of slow play that's legal, where there are certain things.
You're more talking about like, okay, the pace of the game. It's going to end in 2 turns.
Exactly.
Get my guys ready. You know the pace of the game. Okay. In 3 turns, he's going to be at this objective. I can cut him in two turns.
Exactly. Know how many turns it's going to take to do a thing, and then what's going to speed or slow that process down. It basically, like I said, if you're fighting a Goblin Town horde, they're going to take longer on their movement. You need to factor this into your decision making. If they're playing an elite army, then they're going to be quicker. So you start to adjust your strategy based on that. And then there is an element of it where that, okay, you're going to lose this game if this goes out 4 turns. Don't slow play. There's nothing like that. I'm just saying, like, if you retreat strategically or lose your models in a strategic way, maybe certain shielding actions and whatnot, just to keep things moving in a certain direction to make it where there's more models in the field now. So now, because there's more models in the field, the game naturally takes longer. And hence now, instead of 4 turns, you only got 2 turns before the clock was out. That's like that. It's this gray area that a lot of new players they hear the word, like slow the game down, but I'm not talking about like start eating a pretzel and think on your phone or something.
No, but it is like, it's like, that's like, know the pace of the game includes all those things. Like have like, oh shoot, like I know this guy's 4 turns away from breaking. I don't mind spending more of my might, all of my might to break him. The game's going to end soon.
Exactly. That's another great example. Yeah.
That wouldn't happen. I mean, I do this with like, when I play you sometimes, Devin, or other people, I play Fallen Realms, which has like not much might at all. And like, you think, okay, this guy's going to come conserve his might. And I just boom, 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 spend it like it's Christmas. And then it like, first it'll like throw off your opponent, but it'll also like, that's what you got to do with Fallen Realms. You got to punch them hard enough to where they don't get up, because you're only going to get 1 punch and you have light armor. If they punch back, you're going to get destroyed. So like, no, I guess what Devin and I and like all of us are saying is know the pace of the game, which has all of that inside of it. Know the movement, when the game's going to end, like when they're going to break, just have that in your head.
And you can factor this even into your army. Like I played hobbits traditionally and I still do. But one thing I know is if I keep going into combat with you, then and I don't stretch this game out, because the game with hobbits is really to have as many numbers on points as possible. If you slaughter my troops too fast, that's not going to happen. So I'll play differently to elong the game out, which is like I'll take 1 hobbit and throw it against 2 berserkers. stuff like that, where I start reducing casualties and now making the game naturally take longer. And I'll know by the time we have 30 minutes left, I've still got like 50 models on the board, and you're like, oh, like that's a problem. And so, so it's stuff like that, just understand all the variables that are factoring into the clock. And if you want a small gimmick, try to always position yourself so that you're looking at the clock and that your opponent's back is to the clock if you happen to have a room like that. So I always prefer to be facing the clock in some way.
Yeah, that would be like an interesting like conversation on like those little micro manipulatives that we use when we play like really.
I think he actually wanted us to talk about that when he was talking about gimmicks and tricks, but there are actually little ones. I know.
There was actually a situation with this whole clock where, for example, whenever a new round is announced and you see, okay, I'm going to be playing this person on this table, you go there first, you find your spot, even if your opponent wins the
yes,
and they won't switch.
They'll get lazy, and yeah, and actually, you can this really increases if you have a lot of stuff on your side. Like if you have a lot of books and papers. Now, an elite player is not going to mind saying, "Nah, man, you gotta, sorry, bro." But yeah, most players will stay where they're at, just like Nick said, and that is excellent. Yeah, that's and that's not even a time thing. That's you taking advantage of the terrain. If like you're noticing on the board, you go to that table and you're like, there is a strategic favor here that is very slight. That's probably not going to be noticed. Yeah, let me stand on this side, and now very likely to have it. Good shout on that one. That's a funny trick.
So I guess one final thing I want to go over is we've gone over a lot of like the specific stuff and the little things you can do. But one big difference I've seen between like maybe a more mid-level player compared to a higher level player is the planning that goes into games. So one thing with mid-level players, like after I've played a game with them, I'll go like, well, what was the idea behind doing X, Y, and Z? Why were these two guys sitting in the woods in the middle of nowhere or something like that? And a lot of the time they're just like, I don't know, I was just moving my model somewhere or something like that. And planning, especially at like top table levels, is very, very important, because if you don't know how you're going to win, then you're not going to win. You need to visualize in your head, all right, I have a shooting army, they have a horde army, and this is domination. How the heck am I going to win this against their 100 models? You're going to go, all right, I got to play as fast as possible, get as many turns of shooting in to kill them as fast as possible, and then just try and rush the objectives and win that way. And if you don't have that idea and that plan in your head, you're not going to win the game. You're going to play very scattered all over the place. And I mean, you're going to lose.
And actually, to add on to Evan's point, because he was onto something right there, know exactly how many VPs you want to walk away with. Like in his scenario that he was talking about, rush the objectives, but know exactly, like, are you going for all 5? Are you going for 4? Is it these specific 3 and you tend to break them as well? Like, know specifically what objectives you're trying to achieve, which ones you don't mind sacrificing, unless, sure, go for the 12-0. I'm not saying, but really have a game plan of, okay, the minimum I'm looking for is this, and this is how I intend to achieve that minimum. And, swing from there. That's my personal opinion based on your example that you gave.
Yeah, definitely. And also know when you have to take a loss or take a draw. Like sometimes you're in a scenario where it's just like the chances of me winning this are so small and my opponent's just like crushing my army or something like that. You need to keep an eye out and say, all right, at this point, I'm not going to win this. I'm not going to be able to get to the objectives. How do I drain as many victory points from my opponent's score? Or how do I do something maybe a little wacky or silly and try to pull a draw out of this defeat? And sometimes even at the start of the game, say they've got Rangers of Ithilien and we're playing to the death where they deploy 24 inches away from me. But there's this fortress on my side of the board. Okay, I'm going to take my entire army, hide in this fortress, and it's going to be a draw. And that's what I'm going to do the entire game. And that's not necessarily a fun way to play, but sometimes it's the only way to play. So
Well, if you're playing against Rangers of Athelion, then it's not going to be a fun game anyway, so your opponent deserves
true.
it.
There you go.
At least your guys aren't dying. I mean,
there you go. And yeah, I mean, sometimes those are the plays. Like you'll see the common ones, like what just recently got banned is blowing up your own troops. So there's ways to play not fun, but it's like, hey, it's a way to do it.
All right. We'll move into the next question, which is by Keith Banu. And he asks, are you guys looking into possibly having a replacement for Nova event in the fall? I imagine it might be easier to host a smaller event rather than a giant con. So, Devin, I'll move that to you.
All right. So I will say the plans in the work for Nova and the plans in the work for the community as a whole, I guess, or at least from what I've heard so far. So as far as there are currently tournaments being hosted in America, especially in the southern states, and actually now starting to push upward. So
New Jersey has quite a few too, I think.
Yeah, actually, they're actually announced one that they're having to come up. So basically, Nova's obviously, for those of you who don't know and are surprised, it's canceled this year. As far as future years, we're not really sure of what the condition of it will be, but the expectation is that it will still happen. Now, for this fall, if you're asking if anyone is hosting it, like as far as me, because I traditionally host the Nova Open, the answer is no. I don't personally have an objective to get a big tournament, like 50 plus players, whatnot. I know Nova traditionally gets 85 and that's usually selling out easily, but I'm not personally going to run anything this year. I know that Matt Iverson on this podcast is trying to put something together, but he's also trying to plan ahead for potential replacement if Nova doesn't occur. So I'll say for future years, the answer is yes. For this year, I don't think so.
And I think there's just a lot of little like 2024 events popping up, like nothing that can like replace Nova on a grand scale.
Yeah. That's the answer that I'm trying to answer is like, I think we're going to see a 24-man tournament, which is a decent size in America. I think we're going to see Adepticon. Wait, no, Adepticon's already missed. No, actually, I guess there's really LVO maybe. I forgot what tournaments are later in the fall. You might see one like that, but I really think 2021 is probably a wash as far as it's considered with the big tournaments.
And I'd say like the number of attendees isn't due to people don't want to go. Yeah. I'd say it's more so these events have like a limit of like 20, 24 based on COVID restrictions. Because I do see like even your area, like Northern Virginia ones pop up, New Jersey ones pop up, and it's like 20 players max COVID. And it like sells out.
And like it all depends on the state that you're going to as well. That they have their own different rules per state, so that's going to have an impact on it. Yeah. So I guess what Devin and he mentioned, Matt, we're attempting it. We don't think it'll happen, but we'll let you know if it does happen, where we try to create something
for this year.
For this year.
Next year, it's pretty likely there's something will be there. If not Nova itself. Remember, Nova was canceled. It's not dead. So we don't actually know what the status is as far as that.
Okay. We'll move on to our last question for today, which is from Mike Patrick. And he asks a critical analysis of the current state of Middle-earth SBG. He says the Green Dragon podcast did a podcast like the covering current status, positives and negatives of the current state of play, how the game has changed in the last few versions, how armies are built, scenarios and games are played. Has Middle-earth SPG lost its way from the initial version or goal of the Lord of the Rings gameplay, army list fairness, or competitiveness? That particular podcast was extremely interesting, but as I can relate to you all much better than maybe the Australian meta, and very much value all of your input, I think all of your expertise would be very enlightening and heartfelt. And then Mick could shoot holes in all of your theories. Just a thought. He says, I think many of your viewers would find your perspectives very valuable. So what do you guys think about doing an overall video on the current state of Middle Earth SBG as a possible topic.
That's like seven videos.
Yeah, that's so we cover this in brief, and we'll probably continue to cover this subject over and over again as time goes on. I mean, let's make sure we understand the question 100%. He's asking like the current state. Do we agree with what positives and negatives, or like just the history of it?
So he's asking. Basically, said the Green Dragon did a podcast covering the current status, the positive, the negatives, the current state of play, how the game has changed in the last few versions, how armies are built, scenarios of games, basically everything about SBG. What do we think about it? And then how would we describe it? What are the good things? What are the bad things? Blah, blah, go from there.
Yeah, we definitely hit on this subject directly in a previous, which not to say we can't talk about it again. I think we could try to maybe introduce something new. I think all of us agreed, correct me if I'm wrong, that we all agreed that as far as positive, what did we say? That I know we were talking about like as far as
simplifying it a little bit.
Well, that was a negative. Yeah, we all think it's too complicated, and not complicated in a way that the game can't be like. I get it has to have complexity, but I think it's complicated in areas it doesn't have to be. There's all kinds of contradictions, like, oh, Hurric accuracy, you can't, choose which one it is. Oh, but Errol, or not Errol, or whoever, the guy throws spears, he can do that. And then there's other contradictions where in this case, oh, you can't target the mount, but now with Black Dart, you can target the mount and he can't resist with will. And it's like, there's a lot of these contradictions where it's like complexity for no reason. And, I think reducing all of that in the areas where like, the game has certain things like, why does this exist? Like, it doesn't hurt anything, but like, why is it there? Like, in my opinion, channeled spells. Like, I mean, I understand they didn't want to make them overpowered, but they like also don't enter play almost ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, we did mention that, and that was in a previous podcast, and I forget, what was it? The old Q&A, the last Q&A we did.
We might have mentioned it in that one. I'm not exactly. I don't remember off the top of my head.
So I guess we'll try to give some new theories, because we did say that, and we said some good where obviously the game has more models and such than factions and such that we've ever had.
I don't think anything like, at least if you look back in our meta episodes, we ask every player like, what is your sweet spot, and they say 800 or above or 750 above. Yeah. I think any army can win at that, which I like. Yeah. Like back to our conversation, Evan and I used to bring Fell Beast, and it's like, oh, like here we go. Like we have an advantage over many armies just because of what we brought, which isn't really fair.
Yeah.
I feel like the new meta, and I don't know, I think we see that a lot in America too, because in America, we're all isolated from each other semi. So we all bring different lists, whereas the countries that are smaller, everyone knows what they're bringing. Everyone knows what's good, and they counter it. And it's
Australia has the same problem America has, I think, where they're all scattered about. I mean, as far as our metas, though, like it's hard to know what's even our meta now because of coronavirus. But I think that I'm trying to think about the alliances, because that.
Were you all happy to see the alliances? Let's start with that.
I think the alliance matrix is annoying.
But... I think it's okay in some areas and not that great in other areas. Red alliances, I think they're fine. I don't really know why they had to do that. They're separate armies restriction. When that didn't even change anything, what they really had to fix was the shade. That whole thing with your heroes of valor have to be the ones leading your different allied contingents, I really don't like. I don't like it when they just ban taking things together altogether.
So, you know what? That hits on such an important point. They are making these massive sweeping changes in reaction to one model. Kierden and the Shade have created so many rules.
Yeah.
Like massive sweeping changing rules that it's just like, why did that?
And what I don't appreciate is these massive sweeping changing rules are buried under an FAQ or an errata, and like you don't have like a place where everybody knows like, oh, like here these huge things. Like, no, it's like, oh, where's this huge thing here, this huge thing there? Like,
I mean, we've talked about this multiple times on the podcast, but again, the ability for them to make a Q&A where you can search the item that you need to look at. And I know that we've said, you could do that with certain, but try, I guess I would prefer if they would do their best to make it so that it's a search engine in the Q&A. So I don't have to scroll through all these different things. I just type in Samwise Gamgee. Anything that has Sam in it will pop up, and I can find it.
That is the case. Because like if you on the computer in PDF format, you just
you can technically use search.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying if you're in the middle of a tournament, like you're in a game, you need to find out.
You'll have to have an iPad available generally, and it's unfortunate, but I don't know. Maybe this is a controversial idea. I think that GW is a little too resistant to changing a profile that is toxic for the game. Just change the profile. Yeah, if it sucks, just change it. The shade, the Kieran, whatever. If you don't like it, Radagast. It's like, why did you change all of Nature's Wrath? Because one model, which the whole community could have guessed that was a bad idea anyway.
Arwen is unviable now because of Radagast.
Yeah.
And she can just do nothing at this point.
Just change the profile. Like it's not, and I think that is probably, I will say that is the most, that reaction. And I get it. It technically would invalidate an entry in a book that people purchased.
But it's doable. Like they did it with Legolas. Remember, Legolas was fight 7 in Mirkwood, and it's like we all knew that didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's just like boom, quick. Like, okay, cool. Like, awesome. Like it's changed.
Done. And same with like some of these things where you see them slowly bringing them back. I'm like, just change it. Like Alfred. Alfred has had so many FAQs and backup. It's just like, guys, it doesn't work. He doesn't even represent what he does in the movies. Anyway, just change the profile.
Yeah.
Be done with the problem.
Well, and the other thing as well is I think it's inconsistent when they change like rules about it's like you see all the Alfred rules, you see the Kieran thing, but then people don't stop complaining about models like Bolg. Bolg hasn't changed at all. He's the same model. I mean,
another thing with Bolg is I don't entirely think those complaints are justified, seeing as he's very overcosted, but that's another discussion for another time.
Yeah, they have actually arguments for Bolg and why he is. Yeah. And I've heard Adam Troke.
Well, I think the only thing that I've ever heard is just bring him down to fight 6.
Adam Troke actually had a pretty public discussion on why he didn't want him to go below fight 7. He felt strongly that it was appropriate for where he was at. Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah. I only want to discuss the ones where they made a sweeping change in the game as a result of a profile. And that means that now GW is acknowledging that profile is a problem. And that is an issue when you do this massive, change. I would say that it's like I think they need to be more comfortable.
They fix one thing and they cause like 6 other little small problems with the one fix.
Yeah. And it's just kind of like, all right, and so that's what I think. I think that the designers of the game have to get more comfortable with just making a radical change to a profile, number one. And number two, and I think honestly that was also the case with the Hobbit edition of the rules going over the Middle Earth SVG. I think there was a lot of, preference given to the way the profiles were written before. And I try to look at a profile and I'm like, you know what, if Jay had this today, and I have to say Jay because he was the writer of the Middle Earth one, if he had this profile today that didn't exist, and Balrog I think is a great example from in my case, if it never existed at all, would it have been written that way? And I would say no. I don't think it would have been. I think that there's a lot of resistance to changing profiles. I'm not sure why.
I don't think there's anything because it's a good point you mentioned, right? Because I think when most people think of the Balrog's profile, right, you got fight 10, fight 10. So he doesn't have a need to strike. He has a ridiculous amount of will plus resistant to magic, so magic's not as big of an issue to him.
I'm not saying he's overpowered. For anyone because that always comes up whenever I bring up the Balrog. People are like, well, he's not overpowered, you can beat him. I'm not saying he is. It just defies the core logic and fundamentals of the game that you do everything right and you still have a 50-50 roll off of whether or not your hero dies. Like, it's just weird.
Well, they could have fixed that with like a heroic defense in a way.
Well, okay.
Well, yeah, and there's other fixes. I don't want to make
but I get what you're saying.
I think there needs to be, long story short, more preference to changing a bad profile rather than a sweeping FAQ change to correct the problem.
On the bright side, I think this is sort of something that is happening over time. Like we saw the changes to the ballista. He went, okay, at this point, the ballista is just too strong. Let's just bump it up in points. And that worked
That
well.
was a great,
Yeah,
perfect.
it was great. And there
The
were
bomb.
some
It was a clunky fix, but it fixed the bomb.
back in the olden days, there was some serious power imbalances, especially in the Lord of the Rings small army books. There were profiles like Theoden, trying to think of other ones. Elendil, who was just a worse Thorin King Under the Mountain. Like there were so many different profiles in the last edition where they were just so utterly useless and garbage, and they didn't change any of them. And now that they've made the new edition, there's much better profile balance. So hopefully, if we continue on this trend, then we'll have better profile balance.
And that is a great example of areas where they did ignore the old ways. And that's good. And I think there was an outcry for it to be so. And I can imagine, like in my example, the Balrog, that they didn't want to change him to be weaker because everyone wants to play the Balrog. But in the old edition, the Balrog just was awful. And he's not overpowered now, so I get it. Like, I understand. So yeah, there are examples where they do change profile. I guess as long as they keep that trend going, and you see it now in the FAQs and keep that trend going, I think that would be preferred. I mean, as far as metas and whatnot, I mean, honestly, like we usually complain about the same thing because the real thing is this game is actually pretty well designed. It's, once again, for anyone who didn't hear the last time we had these talks, we wouldn't be playing this and having a 2-hour podcast every week if we thought the game sucked. I think it's minor things. It's really, really minor things about the direction of the game. I mean, this sounds like if we were to answer this question thoroughly as the Green Dragon podcast did, we would need a whole 2 hours. They probably had to answer it. But in the quick, I think reaction to broken profiles and, the complexity budget, bringing that down because they're just adding things.
Now, there was one thing that a lot of people had the opinion of when the game first launched in the new edition. And I'm wondering if you guys agree or disagree with this. With their not allowing every model to strike, right? Yeah. It kind of gave Good a very good boost, if you will. Do you think the game kind of headed more good side than evil side in that regard? Because
I have a theory on that. I've heard that argument so many times. Here's my prevailing thought with this. Evil has half the amount of profiles that Good has. Like, I didn't do a count, and maybe Mick will have a count. I don't know. But they like Good has so many more profiles that any change you make is going to invariably give so much more to Good. So you put Heroic Strike in the game, and now it's on many more Good profiles. And I'm like, well, yeah, like cut half of them out. Now it's even. Like it. I think anything you do, if we add a new magical spell to the game, guess who's going to have more of it? Most likely. Like it's almost everything.
Alliances too. Yeah. Like Good has way more alliance matrices that you could do. Historic alliance combos compared to you,
which is why it's always clunky to begin with the alliance matrix because of that. Like, all the good characters are helping each other.
I mean, honestly, I think part of why I personally think Good is better than evil in this edition is sort of the dynamic between Good and evil is supposed to be, okay, Good's got all these synergistic buffs and they've got these strong troops and these super hard-hitting heroes, and evil has all these tricks and all of these special things they can do, like with the Spider Queen and with their magical casters actually being viable, unlike wizards. So that generally balances out. The problem is Good has a lot of models, and actually one specific model that I'm going to mention, Galadriel, Lady of Light, who shut down a whole bunch of these tricks that evil has. Like evil has armies like Harad and Corsairs, who their whole point is to just shoot. She stops that. Mordor, Angmar, they got a bunch of spirits. They've got a bunch of casting. She stops that. And I mean, other than that, evil just has problems dealing with some of the most powerful Good models, because the whole thing is that your good heroes are going to crush through your evil army no matter what. So you need to take something, either shooting into combat or magic or something like that. And Good has ways of easily dealing with both of them. So
Funny you mentioned that, actually. That was a huge discussion point in one of the podcast episodes, where one of the biggest problems in this game is the shooting phase. It is not only boring, but it causes a lot of problems. And I'm not saying get rid of it. You don't want to do that. It has a good effect. It brings your opponent to you. However, it probably needs to be less damaging in some way to make it where you get to the root and core of this game. This is a close combat game. Even the shooting armies, are a close combat army. So, and it's the most fun part of the game for a very good reason. There's interaction. Anytime I do something, you can react to me. There's, give and take there. Shooting, just go grab a beer. I'll tell you what died. Like,
well, I mean, we had talked about this on the other on one of the episodes, and I really, really, actually, genuinely liked this idea, which was the further away you were, the less damage you did, and the closer you were, maybe the more damage. So if you're 6 inches away, maybe you go up a strength. If you're 12 inches away, you stay at your current strength. You're 18 inches away, you go down a strength, and if you're 24 or more, you go down to 1. That kind, and it makes it so that if you're going to shoot, you can still shoot. You do less damage farther away, but the closer you get and you shoot, you get almost rewarded for it because they're going to get to you next turn, but they're so close that it makes sense that you would do more damage based on how close you were. So
and I think
I really like that.
That solves the affiliate ranger problem. It solves so many different shooting things. Because, like, why is Gladiator Lady of Light and Shadow Lord so necessary? Like, I shouldn't need blinding light, which, by the way, I think everyone in the game can agree blinding light doesn't do what it does in the movies for the most part. But it doesn't really make any sense that that's so required. And this game already doesn't like shooting anyway. So it's like, just get rid of it. Like I said, keep it in the game because it is a movement dictated. That's what it's done. That shooting is designed not to obliterate your opponent. Can you imagine how boring that game would be if Athelian Rangers actually won by shooting your opponent off table? If that was the actual objective, and then like literally you didn't even arrive into combat, you just died and you picked up the game. So I'm like, I don't think anyone can argue that shooting is relevant or ever really. It should be only relevant to dictate movement. And that's it. Maybe thin out some numbers. If you're doing a kiting type of army, then sure, thin out numbers a little more. But
I think that there are some people online, especially, and I don't want to make any prejudgments, but a lot of them are a little newer and a little less proficient at the game, who talk about how like, oh, shooting doesn't do anything. Shooting is useless, but they sort of ignore the fact that your archers are fighters too. Like, all you're doing, if let's say you have a 40 model army and you're just like, okay, I can take max bows on all of them. That's 40 points and you're killing what? 2-3 models a turn. It's ridiculous how powerful shooting is. And normally to get this whole nother dimension to your army, it only costs 1 point per model. And it's very, very strong.
It is definitely new players who always see an archer and they're like, oh, that's not a close combat warrior. And you see it in games all the time where they'll do this thing where they'll have their archers all the way over here. And it's just like, they're the shooters. And it's just like, what? No, they're definitely close combat shooters too.
It's especially bad like if you're playing good, because you get into combat, you start fighting, and the archers are just like sitting there doing nothing. And you're like, well, I guess I wasted these points. No, the whole point of archers is that they do their shooting and then they fight with the rest of your models. Like, the easiest way to implement archers in any army is to just take as many of your spearmen as you can and just put bows on them. And then your archers aren't even fighting with their lower defense. They're just shooting and then spear supporting.
Yeah, well, that's
we talked about the court. Oh, so go.
Because the entire mindset shouldn't be these are shooters who may be useful in combat, but rather these are my spear supporters. Oh, they may also shoot.
Yeah.
And for like 10 points extra, I have the ability to shoot.
Yeah, all the good shooting armies are actually, what is it? Besides the fiefdoms, fight 4.
Yeah.
So you have your ranged Athelian fight 4. You have your corsairs fight 4. Even your Isengard crossbow fight 4. Like, and then they're
all decent.
They're good. We talked about in the corsairs episode suppressing fire too. Like, you don't.
But even still, like, even if that wasn't the case, the answer isn't, oh, well, then they should make the archers weaker in close combat. Because no, like I said, if you actually had a game where my army was a bunch of Athelian Rangers and they were so powerful that they could shoot you off the field, but once you got in close combat, I'm guaranteed to die. You're looking at the most boring games in existence. Shooting is not fun. It's not a fun phase of the game. It is there for a purpose, but shouldn't be used as a weapon. This is not 40K. So I think that's the way the direction the game should go. It should minimize the necessity of all these blinding lights. And in fact, I look forward to a world where blinding light and shadow, Pall of Darkness doesn't even exist. Or if it does, it exists in the most minimal way. Like, because it's not even that necessary.
Like in Clash by Moonlight, there is a situation where blinding light actually makes a lot of sense because you can actually turn it on.
No, not lose the spell, but I'm saying the effect it is.
But like there is an effect in Clash by Moonlight where you actually can drive your Gandalf over to your opponent's army. You can turn blinding light on. It illuminates the 12-inch circle. It actually makes your opponent's army visible. Then your army from far away is able to shoot at them.
And so that's
a fun effect.
I'm not saying get rid of blinding light. Like when I say that, I mean that the 6-inch shooting protection of, make it on 6 to hit. Sure, keep it in the game, but it would be nice to know that it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. It's like I keep trying to factor that into half of my list. It's like it just would be nice to because right now shooting is a little bit annoying, and there are some armies, Athelian Rangers of 600 points.
It's like a banner. You want it like a banner where it's great to have a banner, but you don't need a banner.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see a day where we could have these full shooting armies, like literally 2 players bring shooting armies, and it's totally fine because, shooting is just dictating the movement. It's not really that big a deal. They're really just gearing up for the close combat fight. And I think we've been dodging that problem for how many years? I mean, Mick, was there a time where blinding light wasn't necessary?
No.
Did that ever exist in 20 years of SBG where blinding light wasn't on all the top tables? Like, guys, it's
probably about like 12 or 15 years ago. It wasn't necessary, but only if you had more bows than your opponent.
There you go. It's just like, I mean, come on, like the blinding light. Now, I mean, sure, we got Heroic March now, which is nice. We have some other mitigating factors, but it's like clearly, and they now have to design scenarios around it. In the Hobbit edition of rules, and I don't know if this is the reason they did it, they made it where you deployed really, really close to each other. Great. You just solved the shooting problem. So now blinding light was never necessary. You were always close unless you played Maelstrom. Now the scenarios are back to throwing you back further away. So if I'm playing,
See, I think it's just that's the simple fix. Like we don't have to like make the bow worse, like put a limit or do anything. Just change the scenarios, make it like fight like right off the bat, and it would just fix everything with like one simple thing. Just like our whole talk with like the profiles. Just change the profile. Don't cause a whole bunch of different like shenanigans with like a rule change.
And that is the simple fix that they did in the Hobbit edition. My assumption is they ran out of ideas on how many scenarios can you make where you have to, put close to each other. And so they put them further apart and made the problem again. I agree with you. I think the best change they ever made was force you to deploy close. Perfect.
I think that's what tournament organizers could do to like stop those from happening though. You just
but people want to use the game the way GW intended it. You're going to get a lot of purists who are going to say, well, no, I want to use the general's rule. They made a whole pack for it. This is how you play in tournaments. Here's your so at this point it'd be a little difficult for tournament organizers to too many times say, like when I run Nova, I would love to be able to just ban what I don't like, but every time I do, it kind of reduces the legitimacy of a major tournament like that. Same with Ardacon or anything like, which is why I actually am, whatever. You get the idea. So I do think Rainier, your solution is better and more simplistic. But if they do want to create scenarios where you can deploy further back and that's not a problem, then the shooting. However, what I also like about Rainier's idea, which once again they did in The Hobbit and then just reversed it, is it sped the game up. Yeah. Now you had a lot less turns marching toward each other. And so, which is why Volley Fire well, one of many reasons why Volley Fire was removed. I mean, literally the removal of Volley Fire sped the game up by an hour.
Best change in the history of
It was the best change in the history of the game. You get so many new players who don't know. They're like, bring Volley Fire back. And I'm like, you guys don't even know. That was awful. I mean, we were made fun of in GWs where the 40K players would be like, you guys done yet? Like, it's just like we're playing for like 4 hours in these games where because you started the first hour shooting at each other. Yeah, I think all right. So back to the question, I guess we'll end it is progression of the game good or bad? Honestly, we're doing more good changes than bad. And I think that there's a progression toward a faster game, a more deadly game, which is why we can play at 800, 1,000 points. Good. Like there, and that progression continues. There's a progression toward more rules that create interactions within like that faction. So like things like shield wall and stuff that's being handed out now a little bit more often. So we're not getting the same basic profile over and over again. I think that's good. I know I talked about complexity earlier, but there's certain complexity that is good for the game, especially when you have now as many profiles as we do. I think overall the game's moving in a positive direction. I think there was one minor misstep backward with the scenarios, but you know, and maybe some other the FAQs and how they react to that. But overall, I think, I mean, unless anyone disagrees, that the game is moving in a positive direction overall. So that's my speech for the day.
and I think a lot of people, you know, it's like Devin said, you know, we really like the game that much. And so when we see things that we wish could get fixed, we're just trying to make it as close to perfect as possible. It doesn't mean that it's anywhere close to not. We're just trying to make it the best version of it as possible. But it is by far the best, you know, one of the best games to play.
It makes Smaug a scenario piece.
Delete him. Smug.
That's the one change I do in Nova every year. Without hesitation, Smaug's banned. He is a miserable problem in the game. So.
I always actually wondered what you guys thought about the Legendary Legions, because I always thought, well, if the actual army bonuses were better, then you wouldn't necessarily need Legendary Legions, and you could just have those green alliances and actually care about them more. But these days it's like, okay, this is my bonus, which gives me +1 carriage. I don't care, and then you just go into allies.
You have hit the nail on the head. And there's one more piece, in my opinion, you're missing is that one, yeah, the Legions is a solution that isn't needed because the problem shouldn't exist in the first place. Exactly, yeah. And so I see a day where they're probably progressing toward a book of Legions, and maybe the Matrix is erased. I don't actually know. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying like it seems like they're heading that direction. And I think it does add to complexity. If the character interactions interacted a little bit more on how we would expect from an alliance between those two parties, and the bonuses were better for maybe those two factions to do that thing, then I think you would see a halting of that kind of stuff. Maybe even go as far as make a multi-factored bonus. Like let's say, I don't know, if we're thrown out, if Halder allies with Rohan, then there's an effect. You know, you kind of have that where Halder, you know, gets a courage bonus or banner bonus or something from Theoden and Aragorn, but like more of that. So it encourages the alliance just by the way the faction bonuses and the way the profiles are written. Then legions are not necessary. So I agree. Legions are it's a solution to a problem that didn't have to be there in the first place because half the bonuses in the game suck. So
yeah. I have a fundamental problem with Legendary Legions, which is how limited they are. And the problem with limitations is that it prevents a list from being balanced. I'll say that in quotation marks because it's sort of abstract, but you're not able to create a Legendary Legion that isn't like either just unviable completely, like I'm going to say most Legendary Legions are completely unviable, except for a few cases like Rangers of Ithilien and Riders of Theoden, where they are so very good at one specific thing that make them unbalanced. And then in other ways, they have very, very big weaknesses, and it sort of just like skews the game in a way that's not always that much fun. For example, no one enjoys getting shot to death by ranges of Athelion, but once you get into combat with them, it's like, okay, I'll beat these guys up. Riders of Theoden, no one enjoys losing half their army in one turn through 16 bajillion heroic combats. But you take one flappy, monstrous bird, get one hurl off, and congratulations, you've won the game. Like, it's very hard to make a legendary legion that isn't either one, broken, or two, underpowered. And I think most of them are either of those two things.
And I think that's an excellent analysis of that's very true. Is that every legion is like that. It's like they either suck or they're too good. Yeah. It's just like that, it's very few of them are in an in-between state like that. And it's adding more complexity because now there's more like gimmicks and things that you got to remember. And then for sort of what, I guess, is, and it really is, it's a correction to the problem Mick stated. And yeah, so I agree with that. I think, I know they wanted to snapshot one moment in time, but I don't know why that couldn't have been built into the game anyway.
Yeah, like let's say this whole Halder example you give. Like you could do a thing where in Rohan's army list you could say, Rohan can I with whoever, these are the units which you can take in Rohan, and then just like another paragraph. Should you wish to take a pure Rohan army, you can also ally Haldir with the X number of elves or another warband or something like that, and they will count as part of your army. And it's like, okay, well, I've just created the entire Legendary Legion by just ensuring that they are a pure army by themselves, but they have this one other character too.
And there's easy ways, like even the Legendary Legions for Helm's Deep and all that. Simple. If you have no mounted Rohirrim in your army, you can now use your spears as you're throwing spears as spears.
Exactly,
done. Yeah. The whole legion has just been created now. And if you don't want them allying Rohan and some other thing, because just by not taking cavalry models, then say pure 2. Yeah. Make it part of the faction bonus. You lose a faction bonus if you do this, if you ally around. So now you're not going to get those throwing spears that can operate as spears. Yeah. I think every single legion could have been built into the game already. It didn't need to exist. And primarily because of what Evan said. They do that one thing. How hard is it to add one thing into the game? So they're not adding enough. So I think that Legions is a good idea based on an existing problem that is hard to execute and will create more complication down the road. And we are definitely looking at a book of Legions one day. It's going to happen. Like a battle host, because they've done it. They've already done that. Yeah, it's going to happen. And then what's going to happen is, how do you test all these different legions all at once? And that's how you're adding so much that it's like, and then that's why every book, it feels like we're getting something that needs to be nerfed. Riders of Theoden needs to be nerfed. That the Siege Ballista Legion needs to be nerfed. And it's like, because I get it. It's tough. You're adding in this wild new element, but so yeah. I think all of us agree probably the game would do better without legions in a very specific world, and it's not the world we're in right now.
Yeah, we're all like, just why can't everything be perfect, exactly what I want it to be in my
head?
And
this is once again, it's like the problem with complaining is like it's not where we're saying the game is bad. Like it's not like we're saying legions are tearing the game apart. They're not. They're fine.
No, but the podcast is like
cool.
what we think of the game, and there are like obvious changes that we would make to make it more.
Yeah. So I have to keep reiterating that because I'm afraid someone's going to watch this and be like, guys.
These guys hate
the game.
Like, they've been playing this game for collectively almost 100 years, but they loathe it.
All these guys do is complain. Like, and now they've roped in this poor young kid into their complaining.
Who is this?
I've been at this for long enough that I know how to complain too. Don't worry.
Yeah,
you're doing very well too. No, I think
Wasn't there a question about making 200 weapons different or better? Oh yeah.
That was another thing.
Well, there was, but ultimately, I think we've gone over.
We've hit that. Yeah. Clearly, the writers of the game are not familiar with historical sword fighting, which Matt can attest to. So there you go.
Or phalanxes.
or failing. Yeah, well, historical weaponry and like that, because even like how crossbows work and like whatever, we can go all day on that. But yes, they do not function like historical concepts should. So
Okay. Let us know in the comment section below if you would like to see any more of these in future episodes, as well as any questions if you do want to see them for future Q&As, any lists you have for future episodes, and any ideas you'd like for us to speak about in future episodes as well. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
see you guys.